Alright, welcome back. Today we're looking at Death Wish 2 starring Charles Bronson. Paul Kersey is now living in Los Angeles, and here he is with his housekeeper Rosario and is ready to go pick up his daughter from rehab, along with his girlfriend Jerry Nichols, played by Jill Ireland, Bronson's wife at the time. The two are now at the local hospital and are here to pick up Carol Kersey. Have a fun day out.
Will she ever come back to me?
We now see the local mariachi band performing, and suddenly the three want ice cream, so Paul goes to get some, and here we get to see the main villains of the movie, local street punks. So Paul and the punks get into a fight, and this blonde punk over here takes his money, but he also notices that his wallet is missing. So Paul chases down one of the guys and starts to push him around to get his wallet back.
Where's my wallet? I ain't got it.
So he tosses the blade away and walks away.
Of the line and discovered I forgot my wallet.
Sure you did, Paulie. So Paul and Carol go for a boat ride instead. In the next scene, the punks really did steal Paul's wallet and located his address. Here we see Morpheus, played by Lawrence Fishburne. He has no name in the movie as far as I know, so he's just there for the fun. So one of the guys rings the doorbell, a blonde one, and Rosario runs for her life. And there's a rape scene that occurs, so Morpheus looks like he had a lot of fun here.
Do it nice.
So Paul and Carol now back at home as the two reunite with the punks once again. Paul tries to fight all four guys by himself, but he gets dominated and gets knocked out, and they kidnap Carol. Okay, so the punks are now at their local hangout spot while Jerry walks up to Paul's house as she gets nauseous after seeing Rosario's dead body. So Morpheus and the other punk are just staring at Carol like she's some sex toy, and she manages to make her escape, ends up getting killed by this pointy fence. Here, today we see Lieutenant Frank Bullitt, Steve McQueen, and I'm just kidding. Steve McQueen was already dead by the time this movie came out. So Steve McQueen over here tells Paul that they found a glass cat, the one from earlier. Okay, so the same night they managed to find Carol Kersey's body, and the next morning Paul, Jerry, and his employer are at her funeral. Paul starts to aggressively chop up firewood as motivation for revenge. Steve McQueen is back to annoy Paul about the missing suspects, and looks like he wants to take this matter into his own hands. And yeah, he does. Takes out his gun and sets out in the night to go back to his old vigilante days after he sees and Gibbs, all these other street punks around him hostile stare, and walks away. Paul walks to a local thrift store to pick up his vigilante costume and makes his way down to a local motel where he can go frequently to. Yeah, $50 a month. Paul dresses himself as
Kimball.
and pays the monthly fee to James Hong over here and sets out into the night looking for those punks. So Paul is now casually eating his popcorn as the marching band walks by and spots one of those punks, giving this memory flashback. Paul follows him while keeping a distance and leads him to an abandoned hotel where the punks and these other guys go to as he goes Indiana Jones mode here. So he gets ready as he sees the punk exchanging drugs for money while Paul steps on a can of Pepsi. And the other guys are now alerted and shoots one of the drug dealers while he lets the other two run away.
You believe in Jesus? Well, you're gonna meet him.
And he shoots the punk and heads back to the motel as he tapes his gun underneath the closet. And Paul is now back at home pretending like nothing happened. He sees on the news that the guys he killed are now discovered by the local police. So Paul drives around Los Angeles the same night as Clint Eastwood's Every Which Way You Can is playing in cinemas, and also getting some cheesy looks from the local prostitutes. Paul is now back in the motel, puts his costume back on, and is now at an arcade waiting for some excitement as he hears a scream leaving. So he heads down to the parking garage and sees that a couple is getting assaulted. One of the guys gets away while the other guy runs away with a gunshot in his leg. I guess you know who that is. So Kersey runs after him and looks around inside his factory, and a tractor comes out pushing all these crates, and you can see Charles Bronson's stunt double here. And the same guy from earlier. Same night, Steve McQueen is back with the police squad wanting to know some information about the vigilante. And the next scene we see a commissioner or a politician knowing that there's a vigilante on the rise who's preventing all these crimes. They bring back Detective Frank Ochoa, played by Vincent Gardenian. So Frank mentions that Paul Kersey is probably back to his old habits again, so he meets up with a local newspaper writer and with Steve McQueen for this job, but McQueen thinks that Frank might deceive him. Okay, so Frank makes his way to Jerry's apartment, tries to get some information out of her because all this time she thinks Paul is an angel. So Paul is now at home and Jerry's concerned about his life. after seeing Frank and hearing his part of the story. So he tells her that there's nothing to worry about, and they go back to bed. Frank calls up the newspaper reporter from earlier and asks him to park his car in front of Paul's house to make Paul think that he's been being watched by Frank the entire time. Paul knows Frank is back in life, so he leads him on by going through a side trail, takes the bus from there to finish his hobby. Frank follows him by bumping into this woman, and she drives him around to follow the bus. Paul reaches his destination, gets ready for his job. Paul takes the local bus, and Frank catches the taxi and has moments with the driver.
Moving. When it moves, follow it.
The bus and the taxi are at some local stop at some local Los Angeles park, and Paul sees that the punks are right there dancing openly, and now he follows them around. Paul over here is watching their every move, and you can tell Paul is very angry that these guys aren't getting off the bus, and now they get off. Frank over here rips the money in half. And of course, the punks are trading drugs for weapons while Paul over here is all cozy and ready to go. Turns out there's a sniper in the tree, and luckily Frank is over here to kill it. And we get this big shootout between Paul, Frank, and the punks and the weapons dealer. But Frank is the one that gets hit. So Paul kills most of the guys, including Morpheus, while the weapons dealer tries to drive away, but he also gets killed by the notorious vigilante. So the tall punk runs away really quickly while Frank over here gives his last few words before dying. Steve McQueen and his crew have also arrived, late as usual, and one of the punks managed to live and gave the identity away of the tall punk that did run away. So Paul grabs a police scanner and heads back to the motel after having a pre-workout nap to locate Charles Wilson, or Nirvana. So Paul locates Charles Wilson and walking home with his hose, and Paul jumps onto the building's roof while Steve McQueen has a meltdown.
I know who it is.
So
Hold your
Nirvana
position.
escapes his apartment building after he throws his girlfriend against Paul. So he pretty much obliterates Steve McQueen's crew over here like just one man alone. Now he's captured. Paul over here fixes a bloody wound, and Jerry shows him the article of Frank Ochoa being dead. Okay, so now we are in the courtroom, and turns out Nirvana is being sent to rehab for drugs and drug consumption, and Paul finds out that he is being sent to the local hospital where he can get treatment, and that the beta doctor over here will cure him. And Jerry and Paul do indeed meet with this beta male doctor, which gives Paul the advantage to look around and to grab some doctor gear and a name tag for his next scheme. So he grabs a name tag of a James Crab, and meanwhile Paul proposed to Jerry,
Marry me?
even though they're married in real life. So Paul now goes as Dr. Peter Carter and drives off into the night to get his revenge. This rehab officer is suspicious that Paul isn't a doctor. Paul reads the name Ronald K on the magazine and lets him in as he shows him around, especially this room. So Nirvana is brought to a room for treatment, and Paul pulls out his gun. And we get this fight scene, and here we see Charles Bronson's stunt double once again. Nirvana grabs a pocket knife and stabs Paul, but he remains undefeated and pushes him into the electric shock therapy room and flips a switch on him. Ronald K's back tells Paul this.
Give you 3 minutes until I ring the alarm.
Paul runs away and is eager to get home because he and Jerry have plans. Jerry now knows that Paul played doctor behind her back. And just like most women, she leaves and drives off. So Paul gets there late and runs inside. The next day he's at work in front of the radio station for his new architecture project. Since he is an architect, by the way. And we end it here.
I'll be there. What else would I be doing?
And that's Death Wish 2. Then subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next Death Wish 3 analysis. Take care.